The scorching summer of 1871 showed no mercy to the Texas plains as Bethany Ellis wiped sweat from her brow and squinted against the relentless sun. The wooden bucket in her hand grew heavier with each step toward the well that served as her family's lifeline on their modest homestead. Little did she know that this ordinary chore would forever alter the course of her life. Bethany's cotton dress clung uncomfortably to her skin as she approached the stone well that stood a quarter-mile from her family's cabin. Her father had insisted on building their home near a reliable water source when they'd settled this land 3 years prior, following the war that had torn the nation apart. At 22, Bethany had grown accustomed to the harsh realities of frontier life, but the particular brutality of this summer tested even her resilient spirit. As she neared the well, an unusual sight caught her attention: a horse, saddled but riderless, drinking from the water trough. The animal lifted its head at her approach, ears flicking nervously. "Easy there," she murmured, slowing her pace. That's when she spotted him, a man sprawled on the ground beside the well, his body motionless save for the shallow rise and fall of his chest. Dropping her bucket, Bethany rushed forward. The stranger wore the dust-covered clothes of a traveler, worn leather boots, faded denim pants, and a cotton shirt that had once been white. A weathered hat lay nearby, and a holstered revolver remained strapped to his hip. Kneeling beside him, she rolled him carefully onto his back. His face was handsome despite being covered in several days' worth of stubble and trail dust. His lips were cracked from dehydration, and his skin burned with fever. "Sir, can you hear me?" Bethany pressed her palm against his forehead, alarmed by the heat radiating from his skin. The man's eyelids fluttered, revealing striking blue eyes that struggled to focus. "Water," he rasped, the single word barely audible. Bethany immediately moved toward the well, but his hand caught her wrist with surprising strength. "Water first," he managed, his voice desperate. Looking into his fevered eyes, Bethany nodded. "Then rest," she replied firmly, gently removing his grip. "You need both." She worked quickly, drawing a bucket of cool water from the depths of the well. Returning to his side, she lifted his head and helped him drink, careful not to let him take too much too quickly. "Small sips," she instructed as he gulped greedily. "Too much at once will make you sick." The stranger complied, though his eyes never left the water. When he'd had enough, Bethany eased his head back down. "What's your name?" she asked, dampening her handkerchief to wipe his face. "Kent," he murmured, his voice stronger now. "Kent Bradley. I'm Bethany Ellis. Our homestead is just over that rise. Can you stand, Mr. Bradley?" With help, Kent attempted to push himself up but collapsed back with a groan. "Give me a minute." Bethany nodded, continuing to cool his face with the damp cloth. "What happened to you?" "Bounty hunters," he replied, eyes closing momentarily. "Chased me for 3 days. Horse and I haven't stopped. No water since yesterday morning." Bethany's gaze darted to the surrounding countryside, suddenly alert. "Are they still following you?" A weak smile crossed Kent's face. "Lost them at the river crossing 20 miles back." Relief flooded through her, but concern quickly replaced it as she noted his deteriorating condition. "Mr. Bradley, I need to get you to our home. My father and brother can help, but I can't carry you myself." Kent nodded faintly. "Just need to rest a moment." "No," Bethany said firmly. "You need proper care. Shade, food, and more water. You'll die out here in this heat." His eyes found hers, and something passed between them, a moment of understanding that transcended their brief acquaintance. With visible effort, Kent pushed himself to a sitting position. "Your horse seems strong enough," Bethany observed. "I'll help you mount, then lead you back." It took considerable effort and several failed attempts, but eventually, Bethany managed to help Kent onto his horse. She gathered the reins and her empty bucket, then began the slow walk back to her family's homestead. "Why were bounty hunters after you?" she asked, breaking the silence that had fallen between them. Kent remained quiet so long that Bethany thought he might have passed out. Finally, he spoke, his voice strained but clear. "Mistaken identity. They think I'm someone I'm not." "And who do they think you are?" "A man named James Harlow, bank robber from Kansas City." Bethany glanced up at him skeptically. "And you're not this James Harlow?" "No, madam. I'm Kent Bradley, ranch hand from Colorado Territory. Was heading to San Antonio looking for work when they started chasing me." She studied him carefully. Despite his haggard appearance, there was an earnestness in his eyes that made her inclined to believe him. "Well, Mr. Bradley, my father will have questions of his own, I expect." "I'll answer truthfully," Kent promised, swaying slightly in the saddle. "I've nothing to hide." By the time they reached the Ellis homestead, Kent was barely conscious. Bethany called out for her father and brother as they approached the cabin. Both men emerged quickly, surprise evident on their faces at the sight of the stranger. "Bethany, who is this?" her father, Harold Ellis, asked, his weathered face creased with concern. "His name is Kent Bradley. Found him collapsed by the well. He needs help, Pa." Her brother Daniel, who at 25 was the spitting image of their father, moved immediately to help Kent down from the horse. "He's burning up," he observed as Kent's weight fell against him. "Get him inside," Harold instructed, holding the door open. "Bethany, fetch fresh water and clean cloths." The next several hours passed in a blur of activity. Kent was laid on Daniel's bed, his dusty clothes exchanged for clean ones belonging to Bethany's brother. While the men handled this task, Bethany prepared a broth and gathered medical supplies. Her mother Margaret had taught her basic nursing before passing away 2 winters ago from influenza. By nightfall, Kent's fever had broken, and he slept peacefully. Bethany sat beside the bed, replacing the cool cloth on his forehead periodically. Her father had agreed to let the stranger stay until he recovered, though he kept his rifle close and made Bethany promise to remain vigilant. "If he's telling the truth about those bounty hunters, they might still be looking for him," Harold had warned. "And if he's lying," he hadn't needed to finish the thought. As moonlight filtered through the window, Kent stirred and opened his eyes. Clarity had returned to his gaze, and he appeared momentarily confused by his surroundings. "You're safe," Bethany assured him quietly. "You're at our home." Recognition dawned on his face. "Miss Ellis, you saved my life. You needed help. Anyone would have done the same." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Not anyone. Not out here." He attempted to sit up, grimacing at the effort. "Careful," she admonished, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You're still weak." Kent settled back against the pillow. "How long have I been here?" "Just since this afternoon. It's now past midnight." He glanced toward the window. "I should move on at first light. Don't want to bring trouble to your door." "You're in no condition to travel," Bethany stated firmly. "At least stay another day or 2. Get your strength back." Kent studied her face in the dim light. "Why are you helping me? You don't know me. I could be exactly who those men think I am." "Are you?" "No." Bethany nodded. "Then that's enough for tonight. Rest, Mr. Bradley. We can talk more in the morning." Morning brought with it the familiar routine of frontier life. Bethany rose before dawn to prepare breakfast while her father and brother tended to the livestock. She was stirring a pot of cornmeal when Kent appeared in the doorway, looking steadier than the previous day though still pale. "You shouldn't be up," she chided, gesturing toward a chair at the small wooden table. "I've imposed enough," he replied, though he did sit down. I can't lie abed while everyone else works. Bethany placed a cup of coffee before him. You won't be much help if you collapse again. Drink that. Food will be ready shortly. Kent wrapped his hands around the warm cup. Your father doesn't trust me. He doesn't trust anyone he doesn't know. It's how we've survived out here. She glanced at him. You still haven't told me the whole story. Kent sipped his coffee, his expression thoughtful. I was a ranch hand in Colorado, like I said. Been there since the war ended. 6 years of honest work. The ranch owner died this past winter, and his eastern relatives sold the property. New owner brought in his own men. So you headed south? He nodded. Heard there was work in Texas. Cattle drives to Kansas. New ranches opening up. He set his cup down. 3 days ago, I was camping by a creek when 3 men rode up. Didn't introduce themselves, just started accusing me of being this James Harlow character. Said there was a $500 bounty on his head. That's a lot of money, Bethany observed, placing a bowl of hot cornmeal before him. Enough to make men careless about confirming identities, Kent agreed. I tried explaining, showed them what identification I had. They weren't interested in listening. So you ran. One of them drew on me. I managed to get to my horse first. Been running ever since, until my horse and I both gave out near your well. His eyes met hers. I'm not a criminal, Miss Ellis. I swear it on my mother's grave. Something in his direct gaze convinced Bethany more than his words. I believe you, Mr. Bradley. Harold and Daniel returned then, stomping dust from their boots before entering. Harold's eyes narrowed at the sight of Kent seated at the table. You're looking better, he observed cautiously. Thanks to your family's kindness, sir. I'm grateful. Harold hung his hat on a peg by the door. Bethany says you claim to be running from bounty hunters. Yes, sir. Case of mistaken identity. Convenient explanation. Kent met the older man's gaze steadily. It's the truth. I understand your caution. In your position, I'd feel the same. Harold studied him for a moment before nodding slightly. You can stay until you're well enough to travel. Then you'll move on. That's more than fair, Kent agreed. Breakfast proceeded with careful conversation, Kent answering Daniel's curious questions about Colorado while Harold observed quietly. Afterward, despite Bethany's protests, Kent insisted on helping with chores. Though limited by his weakened state, he managed to split some firewood and assist Daniel with mending a fence near the house. By midday, his strength was flagging, and Bethany firmly ordered him to rest on the porch. She brought him water and sat beside him, her needlework in hand. You're pushing yourself too hard, she admonished. I'm not used to being idle, he replied. Besides, I'd like to convince your father I'm worth keeping around for more than a couple of days. Bethany's hands stilled. You're planning to stay in the area? Kent leaned back in his chair, considering. Maybe. Seems like good country. And I notice your father and brother could use an extra hand. We manage, Bethany said, though she couldn't deny the truth of his observation. Since her mother's death and her older brother William's departure to start his own homestead 50 miles south, the work had become increasingly challenging. You do more than manage, Kent said admiringly. But that doesn't mean it couldn't be easier with help. Before Bethany could respond, a cloud of dust appeared on the horizon. She stood, shielding her eyes against the sun. Riders coming. 3 of them. Kent was immediately on his feet, tension visible in every line of his body. The bounty hunters. You can't be sure. I am. His hand moved instinctively to his hip, but his gun belt had been removed when they'd brought him inside. Where's my revolver? Pa has it, Bethany said, moving toward the door. Stay here. Inside, she quickly informed her father of the approaching riders. Harold's face hardened as he retrieved his rifle and Kent's revolver from a cabinet. "Daniel, get the shotgun," he ordered. "Bethany, you stay inside." "Pa, let Mr. Bradley explain to them," she urged. "If they see he's not who they're looking for, if he's telling the truth," Harold interjected. "We don't know that for certain." Outside, Kent stood rigidly on the porch, watching the approaching riders. Harold handed him his revolver without a word. Kent checked it quickly, then holstered it. "I won't bring violence to your home," he promised. "If it comes to that, I'll leave with them." Harold's expression remained impassive, but he nodded once in acknowledgement. The three riders slowed as they approached the homestead, spreading out slightly in a tactical formation that spoke of experience. The leader, a heavy-set man with a thick mustache, raised his hand in greeting but kept the other near his holstered weapon. "Afternoon," he called. "Hope we're not intruding." "That depends on your business," Harold replied evenly. The man's eyes shifted to Kent, and a smile spread across his face. "Well now, looks like our business is standing right there on your porch, friend. James Harlow, you've led us on quite a chase." Kent stepped forward. "My name is Kent Bradley. I've told you before, you've got the wrong man." The bounty hunter chuckled. "Sure, and I'm President Grant." He turned to Harold. "Sir, this man is wanted for robbing the First National Bank in Kansas City. Killed a guard in the process. There's a $500 reward for his capture." Harold glanced at Kent, uncertainty clear in his expression. "I've never been to Kansas City," Kent insisted. "I've spent the last 6 years working the Double R Ranch in Colorado Territory. Ask for Foreman Jenkins if you don't believe me." "That's quite a ride to verify your story," the second bounty hunter remarked. He was younger than the first, with cold eyes and a jagged scar across his cheek. "Easier than chasing an innocent man halfway across the country," Kent countered. The lead bounty hunter sighed dramatically. "Look, we don't want trouble. Just hand him over, and we'll be on our way." "He says you're mistaken," Harold stated. "Do you have proof of his identity?" The bounty hunter reached into his saddlebag and extracted a folded paper, which he extended toward Harold. "Got a wanted poster right here. Judge for yourself." Daniel retrieved the poster and brought it to his father. Harold studied it for a moment, then passed it to Kent. Bethany, who had defied her father's order and now stood in the doorway, moved closer to look at the drawing on the poster. There was a superficial resemblance to Kent, the same general build and coloring, but the face in the drawing had a narrower nose and a distinctive scar across the forehead that Kent lacked. "This doesn't look much like him," Bethany observed. The bounty hunter shrugged. "Posters aren't always perfect likenesses. But we got a detailed description, 6 feet tall. Blue eyes, brown hair, mid-30s. Rides a chestnut mare with a white blaze. Sound familiar?" Kent's horse indeed matched that description, and Bethany felt a flicker of doubt. She glanced at Kent, whose expression remained resolute. "The man you're looking for has a scar across his forehead," Kent pointed out. "Do you see a scar on me?" The third bounty hunter, who had remained silent until now, leaned forward in his saddle. "Scars can be hidden. Hair grows. Disguises change. Why don't we settle this simply?" He drew his revolver, though he didn't point it at anyone specifically. "Come with us peacefully, or things might get unpleasant for everyone." Harold raised his rifle slightly. "You're threatening my family on my land. I suggest you reconsider." The atmosphere grew taut with tension as both sides measured each other. Bethany's heart pounded in her chest, her eyes darting between her father, brother, and Kent. "Wait," Kent said suddenly. "I have proof." He turned to Bethany. "In my saddlebag, there's a letter from my former employer. Would you get it, please?" Bethany hurried to comply, retrieving Kent's weathered leather saddlebag from where it had been stored. She brought it to him, and he quickly extracted several folded papers. He handed one to Harold. "This is a letter of recommendation from John Reynolds, owner of the Double R Ranch, dated last winter before his passing. It confirms my employment there for 6 years." He extracted another paper. "And this is my discharge papers from the Union Army, 8th Illinois Cavalry. It has my full description, including the fact that I have no distinguishing scars or marks." Harold examined both documents carefully before passing them to the lead bounty hunter, who frowned as he read. "These could be forged," he said, though with less conviction. "By a man on the run? When would I have had time?" Kent challenged. "And why would I carry forged documents that don't match the identity I'm supposedly hiding? If I were James Harlow, wouldn't I have papers claiming I was someone other than Kent Bradley?" The logic of this argument seemed to penetrate even the bounty hunter's determined mindset. The leader handed the papers back, his expression conflicted. "There's still the matter of the horse," he insisted stubbornly. "Chestnut mares with white blazes aren't exactly rare," Daniel pointed out. A tense silence fell over the group. Finally, the lead bounty hunter sighed heavily. "We can't afford to chase the wrong man all over Texas." He fixed Kent with a hard stare. "If we find out you're lying—" "I'm not," Kent stated firmly. "And I wish you luck finding the real Harlow." The bounty hunters exchanged looks, clearly reluctant to abandon their pursuit, but faced with evidence that contradicted their assumptions. With obvious displeasure, the leader tipped his hat. "Sorry to have troubled you folks. We'll be moving on." No one relaxed until the 3 men had ridden well beyond the homestead and disappeared over the horizon. Only then did Harold lower his rifle. "That could have gone badly," he observed. Kent nodded grimly. "I appreciate your standing with me, Mr. Ellis." Harold studied him thoughtfully. "Those papers seem genuine enough. Still, those men might return if they don't find their quarry." "All the more reason I should move on soon," Kent said, though his eyes briefly met Bethany's as he spoke. "No sense in leaving before you're fully recovered," Harold decided. "And as it happens, we could use help bringing in the hay before the weather turns. If you're willing to earn your keep for a week or 2. The offer, though gruffly delivered, represented a significant shift in Harold's attitude. Kent straightened, visibly pleased. "I'd be honored, sir, and grateful for the opportunity." As the tension of the confrontation dissipated, life on the Ellis homestead gradually returned to its normal rhythm. Kent's strength returned rapidly, and within days he was working alongside Harold and Daniel from sunup to sundown. His experience on the Colorado ranch proved valuable, and even Harold had to admit that the extra hands made the workload considerably lighter. For Bethany, Kent's presence brought an unexpected lightness to her own daily routine. He often sought her company during brief rest periods, sharing stories of his time in Colorado or asking questions about her family's journey to Texas. Unlike many men she'd known, he listened when she spoke and valued her opinions. One evening, a week after the bounty hunter's visit, Bethany found Kent sitting alone on the porch steps, staring at the stars. She hesitated briefly before joining him, setting a cup of coffee beside him. "Penny for your thoughts," she offered. Kent smiled, his face now clean-shaven and healthier than when she'd found him at the well. "Just contemplating my next move. Your father mentioned the hay will be finished in a few days. Are you eager to leave?" Bethany asked, trying to keep her tone casual despite the sudden tightness in her chest. Kent turned to look at her, his expression serious. "No. In fact, I've been trying to find reasons to stay." The simple honesty of his statement caught Bethany off guard. Since her mother's passing, she'd focused so intently on helping maintain the homestead that she'd given little thought to her own future. The few eligible men in the area had never captured her interest, and she'd resigned herself to the possibility of remaining unmarried. Yet now, sitting beside this man who had arrived so unexpectedly in her life, she felt a flutter of possibility. "I'm sure Pa would welcome your continued help," she said carefully. "Winter preparations will keep us busy for months." "Is that reason enough for you?" Kent asked softly. "My staying to help with chores?" Bethany felt heat rise to her cheeks, grateful for the darkness that concealed it. I've enjoyed your company, Mr. Bradley." "Kent," he corrected gently. "After all we've been through, I think we can dispense with formalities." "Kent?" she echoed, surprised by how natural his name felt on her lips. He shifted slightly, turning more fully toward her. "Bethany, I know we've only known each other a short time, but I've never met anyone quite like you. Your strength, your kindness." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "When I was lying by that well, certain I was about to die, you appeared like some kind of miracle. And every day since, I found myself increasingly grateful that you found me." Bethany's heart pounded as she recognized the direction of his words. "Kent, I'm not asking for anything," he interrupted gently. "Just telling you that if your father is amenable to my staying on longer term, perhaps through winter, I'd like that very much." Relief and a touch of disappointment mingled in Bethany's chest. "I'd like that too," she admitted. Kent smiled, reaching out tentatively to cover her hand with his own. The simple touch sent warmth spreading through her arm. They sat in companionable silence for several minutes, watching as a shooting star streaked across the vast Texas sky. "Make a wish," Bethany murmured. Kent's fingers tightened slightly around hers. "Already did." The following morning, while Bethany prepared breakfast, she overheard Kent speaking with her father outside the barn. Though she couldn't make out the words, the earnest tone and her father's thoughtful responses suggested a serious conversation. When they entered the kitchen together, her father's expression was unreadable, but Kent's eyes held a quiet satisfaction. "Kent has made me a proposition," Harold announced as they gathered for the morning meal. "He's offered to stay through winter as hired help, in exchange for room, board, and a small wage come spring." Daniel glanced up with interest. "We could certainly use the extra hands." "I agree," Harold said, surprising Bethany with his ready acceptance. "And if things work out well, we might discuss more permanent arrangements when spring arrives." Bethany kept her eyes on her plate, afraid her expression might reveal too much of her reaction to this news. Kent would be staying at least for several months. The thought filled her with a warmth that had nothing to do with the steaming coffee before her. "That's settled then," Harold concluded. "Now let's discuss today's tasks. That north fence won't mend itself." As autumn progressed into winter, Kent became an integral part of the Ellis household. His willingness to tackle the most demanding tasks, his skill with livestock, and his quiet good humor gradually won Harold's complete trust. Even Daniel, initially wary of the newcomer, came to treat Kent like the brother he'd missed since William's departure. For Bethany, the changing seasons brought a transformation of her own. The careful friendship she'd formed with Kent deepened with each passing day. Their conversations stretched into the evenings, ranging from childhood memories to dreams for the future. Sometimes they sat together on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the increasing chill, watching the stars and sharing comfortable silences that needed no words. Kent never overstepped propriety, always maintaining a respectful distance when others were present. But Bethany noticed the way his eyes followed her movements, the way he seemed to brighten when she entered a room. And she couldn't deny the quickening of her own pulse whenever their hands accidentally touched, or when she caught him looking at her with that particular expression, a mixture of admiration and something more profound that made her breath catch. On a crisp December evening, with the first serious cold front approaching, Kent helped Bethany gather the last of the root vegetables from the garden. Their breath formed small clouds in the air as they worked side by side, pulling carrots and turnips from the increasingly hard ground. "I think that's the last of them," Bethany said, brushing soil from a particularly large turnip before adding it to her basket. Kent straightened, arching his back to stretch tired muscles. "Good timing. Weather's turning faster than expected." Bethany glanced at the northern sky, where dark clouds were building. "Pa says it might snow tonight." "First snow of the season," Kent observed, gathering his tools. "Did you get snow in your part of Missouri?" "Some. Not like Colorado, I imagine." Kent chuckled. "No, probably not. First winter at the Double R. Snow was so deep it reached the cabin's windowsills. Thought spring would never come." They walked together toward the cabin, their baskets heavy with the harvest. When they reached the porch steps, Kent paused, his expression suddenly serious. "Bethany, would you walk with me to the well? I'd like to fetch fresh water before the storm hits." Something in his tone made her hesitate, but she nodded. "Let me take these inside first." After depositing their vegetables in the root cellar beneath the cabin, Bethany retrieved her shawl and joined Kent outside. He carried 2 empty buckets, though she suspected water wasn't his primary motivation. They walked in silence until they reached the well where they'd first met nearly 4 months earlier. Kent set the buckets down and turned to face her, his expression a mixture of nervousness and determination. "I wanted to bring you here because this place has special meaning for me." "For me as well," Bethany admitted softly. "When I first opened my eyes and saw you leaning over me, I thought perhaps I died and you were an angel," Kent said, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Then you told me to drink slowly, and I realized no angel would be quite so practical." Bethany laughed despite the butterflies in her stomach. "I was hardly going to let you make yourself sick after I'd found you alive." Kent took a step closer. "You saved my life that day. But more than that, you've given me a reason to build a new one." He took a deep breath. "Bethany, I've spoken with your father." Her heart skipped a beat. "About what?" "About my intentions. About my feelings for you." Kent reached for her hand, which she gave willingly. "I know it hasn't been very long, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Bethany Ellis. I love your strength, your kindness, your practical mind, and your gentle heart." Bethany felt tears welling in her eyes. "Kent, you don't need to answer now," he said quickly. "Your father suggested I give you time to consider. He said proper courtship should take at least 6 months, and we've only known each other for 4. "What exactly did Pa say?" Bethany asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kent's fingers tightened around hers. "He said that if you're agreeable, I may formally court you with the understanding that I intend to ask for your hand in marriage come spring." A flash of uncertainty crossed his face. "Are you agreeable, Bethany?" For all her practical nature, Bethany found herself momentarily unable to form words. Instead, she stepped forward and, with a courage that surprised even herself, pressed her lips gently against his. The kiss was brief, a mere whisper of contact, but when she pulled back, the joy in Kent's eyes told her she'd given him the answer he sought. "I love you too," she said, finding her voice at last. "And yes, I am very agreeable to being courted by you, Kent Bradley." Kent's smile was radiant. "Your father will expect us back soon," he said, though he made no move to release her hand. "We should at least fill these buckets," Bethany suggested, gesturing to their original purpose. "Otherwise, he might suspect we weren't entirely focused on water collection." Kent laughed, the sound ringing clear in the cold air. A wise precaution. They worked together to draw water from the well, their movements synchronized as if they'd been performing this simple task together for years rather than months. As they started back toward the cabin, the first snowflakes began to fall, delicate white specks against the darkening sky. "It's beautiful," Bethany murmured, pausing to watch the snow descend around them. Kent set his buckets down and drew her close, his arms encircling her waist. "Yes, you are," he replied, his eyes fixed not on the snow but on her face. This time when they kissed, it was slower, deeper, a promise of all that was to come. Bethany felt as though her heart might burst with happiness, even as snowflakes melted against her flushed cheeks. Later that evening, as the family gathered around the fireplace while wind howled outside, Harold Ellis officially announced Kent's intention to court Bethany. Daniel offered hearty congratulations, teasing that he'd suspected their feelings for weeks. "You weren't exactly subtle, either of you," he chuckled, dodging the cushion Bethany tossed at his head. The winter months passed in a haze of joy for Bethany. The formal courtship changed little in their daily interactions. There was still work to be done, animals to tend, and a household to maintain, but it added a layer of sweetness to every shared moment. Kent began teaching her to play chess in the evenings, while she introduced him to her mother's favorite hymns, playing them on the small pump organ that was one of the family's few luxuries. In February, a letter arrived from William, Bethany's older brother, announcing his intention to visit in the spring with his wife and young son. The news added to the growing sense of anticipation that permeated the Ellis household as winter began to loosen its grip on the land. March brought the first signs of spring, green shoots pushing through thawing soil, longer days filled with increasingly warm sunshine, and the return of birdsong to the trees surrounding the homestead. It also brought the day Kent had been waiting for. On a Sunday afternoon, with the first wildflowers dotting the prairie, Kent asked Bethany to accompany him on a ride. They traveled to a ridge overlooking a small creek that cut through the Ellis property, where Kent had prepared a simple picnic. After they'd eaten, Kent took Bethany's hand and led her to the edge of the ridge, where the view stretched for miles across the Texas landscape. "I've been thinking about the future," he said. "Our future." Bethany squeezed his hand encouragingly. "As have I." Kent turned to face her, his expression serious but filled with love. "Your father has given his blessing. He says the 6 months are up, and I've proven myself reliable." A smile touched his lips. "His words, not mine. Pa has always been a man of few words, but he means them when he speaks," Bethany replied, her heart beginning to race with anticipation. Kent nodded, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object. Opening his palm, he revealed a ring, a simple gold band with a small pearl set into its center. "I rode to town last week while you were visiting the Johnsons," he explained. "I wanted something as beautiful and enduring as my love for you." Tears sprang to Bethany's eyes as Kent dropped to one knee before her, the ring held carefully between his fingers. "Bethany Ellis, when you found me at that well, you didn't just save my life, you gave me a new one. A better one. One filled with purpose and joy and love." His voice wavered slightly with emotion. "Will you make that life complete by becoming my wife?" "Yes," Bethany whispered, then louder. "Yes, Kent Bradley, I will marry you." Kent slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to his feet and swept her into an embrace that lifted her off the ground. Their laughter mingled with the spring breeze as he twirled her around, both of them dizzy with happiness. The wedding took place in May, with William's family in attendance along with the few neighbors scattered across the surrounding countryside. The ceremony was held beside the well where they'd first met, now decorated with wildflowers and ribbons. Bethany wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully altered by Mrs. Johnson from the neighboring homestead. Kent, looking impossibly handsome in a new suit, watched her approach with such open adoration that several of the female guests dabbed at their eyes. Harold Ellis, with uncharacteristic emotion in his voice, placed his daughter's hand in Kent's. "Take care of her," he said simply. "With my life," Kent promised. The local minister performed the ceremony, his words nearly drowned out at one point by the joyful laughter of William's son as he chased a butterfly through the assembled guests. No one minded the interruption. Indeed, the simple joy of the child seemed to underscore the promise of the future that Kent and Bethany were embracing together. After the vows were exchanged and the celebration meal consumed, the newlyweds bid farewell to their guests. Harold and Daniel had agreed to spend a few days with William's family, giving the couple privacy in the cabin that would now be their home as well. As twilight descended, Kent and Bethany stood together on the porch, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. "Mrs. Bradley," Kent murmured, drawing her close, "I still can't quite believe you're my wife." Bethany leaned into his embrace, savoring the solid warmth of him. "Believe it, Mr. Bradley. You're stuck with me now. For the rest of our lives," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And beyond," Bethany whispered, turning in his arms to meet his lips with her own. 5 years later, the Ellis-Bradley homestead had transformed considerably. With Kent's labor and innovative farming techniques, the cultivated land had expanded, and a small orchard of fruit trees now grew where once there had been only prairie grass. The original cabin had been enlarged to accommodate the growing family, with a second structure nearby where Harold and Daniel now lived. On a warm summer afternoon, Bethany sat on the porch, watching her 3-year-old daughter, Margaret, named for her grandmother, playing in the yard. The child's laughter rang out as she chased a butterfly, her dark curls bouncing with each step. Inside the cabin, their 1-year-old son, James, was napping, his small body sprawled in trusting abandon across his crib. Bethany's hand rested on the gentle swell of her stomach, where their third child had recently made its presence known. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention. Kent appeared, riding in from the fields where he'd been working with Daniel. He dismounted with fluid grace, his skin bronzed from years of outdoor work, his smile as bright as the day she'd agreed to marry him. "There are my girls," he called, scooping Margaret up as she ran to meet him. The child squealed with delight as he swung her in a circle before settling her on his hip. "Papa, I saw a butterfly. It was blue and yellow and so pretty." "As pretty as you?" Kent asked, tapping her nose gently. Margaret giggled. "No, Papa, I'm prettier." "That you are," he agreed, climbing the porch steps to join Bethany. He leaned down to kiss her, a gesture that had not lost its sweetness despite the familiarity of 5 years of marriage. "How are you feeling today?" he asked, his free hand coming to rest beside hers on her stomach. "Wonderful," Bethany replied truthfully. "This one seems eager to join us, more active than the other two were." Kent smiled, sitting beside her with Margaret still chattering in his arms. "Maybe we'll have another daughter, one as strong and determined as her mother. Or another son as kind and steadfast as his father," Bethany countered. "Either way, we are blessed." Kent's expression grew reflective. "I was thinking about it today while working. How different things might have been if you hadn't found me that day." Bethany reached for his hand. "But I did find you, and you found me right back." Margaret, growing bored with adult conversation, wriggled free of her father's grasp and returned to her butterfly pursuit. Kent watched her for a moment before turning back to Bethany, his eyes full of the same love that had sustained them through seasons of plenty and hardship alike. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked softly. "Saving the half-dead cowboy at the well? Taking on all this?" He gestured to encompass their home, their children, the life they'd built together. Bethany leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, a lingering kiss that held the answer to his question. When she finally drew back, she cupped his face in her hands, her eyes meeting his steadily. "Never," she whispered. "Not for a single moment." Kent pulled her close, his arms encircling her and their unborn child. Together they watched as Margaret danced across the yard, her small figure silhouetted against the vast Texas sky that had witnessed their beginning a fateful meeting at a well where a dying man had asked for water, and a determined woman had promised him rest, neither knowing that they were taking the first steps on a journey that would last a lifetime. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the landscape in hues of gold and amber, Bethany reflected on the unpredictability of life. How a simple trip to draw water had altered the course of her existence, bringing her a love deeper than any she could have imagined and a family that fulfilled her in ways she hadn't known she needed. "I love you, Bethany Bradley," Kent murmured against her hair, "today and always." "And I love you," she replied, content in the knowledge that no matter what challenges the future might hold, they would face them together just as they had since that first day by the well, when water and rest had been only the beginning of all they would give each other.